this is a video to help you navigate the data that we've been gathering on the students since we've returned to school. The MAP data that we've been working on collecting over the last week and into next week, there's a couple of pieces that I would remind you of if we were meeting face to face, and just to briefly revisit some things we've talked about in the past, but just to remind you of a couple of pieces that can really help as teachers are looking at this information and you as administrators are looking at information and trying to decide who are the students that need help once you get, who are the students that need help that have had some trouble recouping and rebounding since we've returned to school this fall. So let's get started. The first thing I wanted to remind you is that the MAP score predictions. This is the MAP score predictions that are listed for reading. You'll notice if we take a fifth grader, in the fall, we wanted a fifth grader to score a 213. And if they scored a 213 with reasonable confidence, we could expect them to score meets on the SC Ready test in the spring. And then when you come to the winter administration, you would want them to score 216. And several times in the past, this number has been confusing because people wonder, why does this number change from fall to winter? Well, the assumption is that if a student has moved from fall to winter, they have acquired knowledge, and so they should be progressing. And so it goes along with the whole notion of growth, that a student that was in 213 should have grown 3 points from fall to winter in fifth grade on reading in order to maintain that prediction of meets in the spring on the SC Ready test. Now, I'm going to call your attention to this column right over here next to the meets category, which shows numbers in the percentiles, and it tells us that a fifth grader, we'd want them to score in the 66th percentile in order to have a pretty good chance of demonstrating and scoring a meets on SC Ready in the spring. Now this number is going to come back into play, and we're going to talk about that in just a few moments when we look at the quadrant graph. But if you'll notice, these numbers right here under level 3 in bold indicate the RIT score a student should score in order to make a meets in the spring. And here's mathematics. Now mathematics, the percentiles are very different. You'll notice that for a fifth grader, we'd want them to grow 6 points from fall to winter in order to maintain that projection of meets. And we'd want them to score in the 54th percentile. And you'll also notice that by the time we get to middle school at the 8th grade level, a student would have to score in the 70th percentile in order to be reasonably expected to score meets or exceeds on the SC Ready test in the spring. Now, I'm going to remind you of a few pieces from the quadrant graph. The quadrant graph lets us look at how students performed versus their growth. And so when we look at this, we see based off of the student's performance, this is telling us in the winter where the students fail. So if we move further along the x-axis, that indicates higher achievement. So that means the students scored higher as we move along. And up the y-axis, it's talking to us about conditional percentile growths. And what that is indicating is how did they achieve on their growth from fall to winter. Now, what's really interesting here, this is where on the graph, when you pull it up on the MAP site, it talks about the achievement percentile. I've set this one at 54. 54 was fifth grade for mathematics. So what that means is when we look at this line right here that would seem like the origin of our graph or the y-axis of our graph, this line indicates the students to the left, so over here, are projected to score does not meets or it approaches on SC Ready in the spring. And so it shows us here that right now we've got 4 students in this class that would be expected to score meets or exceeds on the SC Ready test in the spring. So what my suggestion here is to go back to those first two slides that we looked at and change that achievement percentile to the percentile that matches up for your subject and grade that you're looking at. This helps give a good visual of how the class is expected to perform on SC Ready. And that really helps you kind of frame the performance for the students. Now, we're not super concerned about SC Ready performance at this point because we know above all things this year is an anomaly year. But what we would like for you to think about is how are the students growing? So here, what I find probably to be alarming is this line at the 50th percentile. That conditional growth line at 50 indicates that the students above, so up here, met or exceeded the growth that MAP predicted for them. Now, let's stop for a minute and think about this. If our students were in the schools from fall to winter and without interruption, so maybe they didn't have to go out on quarantine and they've been able to continue their continuous achievement and learnings from fall to winter, we would really hope to see the majority of our students falling above this line, so up in these two zones here. Now, we know that students were out of school from March until the end of the school year. And there was a lot of loss, especially in mathematics. We would hope that this year, probably above any other year, the students, we would have more students at or above this 50th percentile mark, because we would hope that our instruction from the fall to winter has been solid enough to help increase students from where they tested in the fall. The ones that are the most concerning are the ones that are in this zone right here. So we are scoring less than the 20th percentile on the MAP test in winter and failing to meet our growth. So that means these two children here specifically. Now, if this was a live graph and you were on the MAP site, if you place your cursor over that dot, it would tell you who that student is. And what I would caution here is that something is happening with these two kids. I would hope above all hopes that maybe these children have been out on a 24-day quarantine and they've missed a good portion of instruction this fall, and that's why these two kids are here. If these two children were here, continuous fall to winter with no interruptions, and they still remained below the 20th percentile and failing to meet the recommended growth, I would really caution you to take a good hard look at what's happening with these kids. These children are failing to meet their growth, and we need to figure out what's going on. What is the mediating factor? So this graph helps us to really target in on specific students. Now, what's really interesting is when you come over here, we've got someone who is in the 70th percentile, but really failed to meet their growth from fall to winter. So once again, any of these students who are in, well, likewise, like what we saw with the x-axis, same holds true for the y-axis. Any of these children who are below the 20th percentile for conditional growth, those students warrant a second look and a thought of, why did this student not meet their growth? What happened? Maybe it was a bad test day, but maybe there's something else that's going on that we need to spend some time thinking about. So this is one graph I wanted to show you to kind of point out a few things. Now this next one is another one, and this one I picked as middle school, 8th grade middle school. If we look at this class, you'll see I set the achievement percentile at 70, and what you'll notice is that there is only one kid in this class projected to score meets or exceeds. The same holds true from our previous graph. The students who are here, we need to pay attention to what's happening with these children, these three little plus signs. We see, this is what I was talking about. If someone scored in the 10th percentile, I would really hope that their growth score puts them above the 50th percentile, because this means the student met and exceeded the growth that MAP predicted for them. And I think that's really important. So that's a real important piece to think about. Also, on the flip side, we've got this student right here who's really close to that cut score. That student could make the jump over that line if we're really thinking about who is this kid and what are the needs and how can we better help them. So this is an important mark right here. The next thing I want to show you is once you scroll down below that quadrant graph, you get the students' names and it tells you what color of the graph they're in. So here, if we see that rosy color, then we know that that student was low achieving and low growth. And so for instance, we look here, the fall score was 223. We expected them to go to 224. And what we saw here is that the student went down 2 points. And so with that, that lets us know, hey, they failed to grow that 1 point. And even more tragic, the student didn't, well, I take that back. The students should have scored 226. They scored 224. They only went up 1 point. So what's happening here? We also can get this information right here of seeing that their conditional growth score was 34. And what that indicates is that they were in the bottom third for growth compared to other 8th graders taking this mathematics test. Now, this one is outstanding. The student scored 221, should have scored 224, and moved to 232. That is outstanding. So, hey, what happened here? What are the differences? And this opens up for some really great conversations with your classroom teachers, between administration and different meetings, or even just within among classroom teachers meeting as a group. This was all a set of, this video was based completely off of the quadrant graph that's available to everyone on the MAP growth reports. I would encourage you to take some time looking at this data with your school and thinking about how students are progressing. It's not about what somebody's going to score on SC Ready. It's about students improving on their knowledge. Are we closing that gap that we saw that was so enormous in mathematics, especially from fall to winter instruction? And if we're not, we need to be thinking about what's our plan to move forward and make sure we can work on closing that gap. If you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. And I thank you for your time and hope you have a great day.